Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me, as always, some of the best MMA minds in the world. This week, we got Mike Bond in Toronto, Mr. Johnny on the spot, coming off some great interviews with Tony Ferguson and MVP, both here on the channel. Nolan King in Boston, all over the Cain Velasquez story. Last week, he sent me the voicemail with a follow text on the phone with Mark Garagos. Goes from Las Vegas. He, along with Abby Subhan, Burt Watson, they just dropped Legend to Legend with Michael Bisping, also on the channel. Check it out. Cold coffee on the ones and twos. Let's get to it, fellas. All right. Friday at Bellator 281, we saw Logan Storley defeat Michael Venom Page by split decision to become Bellator's interim champion in the welterweight division. Though Storley got the job done, this fight was not labeled exciting and or entertaining by fans and MMA media. To top it off, when asked about the fight, Bellator president Scott Coker offered the following, quote, "Honestly, I thought MVP won that fight." He also added, "You can't just lay on somebody and think you're going to win and score points. That's not MMA, that's wrestling." What did you guys think of this message from Coker to his new interim champion and, quite frankly, to other wrestlers that use similar tactics? We have 4 minutes on the clock. Mike, you're leading off.
Well, it is MMA. I mean, I know I can't agree with Scott Coker in that sense, but I mean, this is kind of, to a degree, what Bellator's asked for. I mean, they sign all these very green wrestlers, basically coming, straight out of college, or in Aaron Pico's case, even earlier, and not everyone's going to develop into, say, an Aaron Pico who has insane hands and natural knockout power. You're going to have a guy like Logan Storley who is going to have to resort to his wrestling base, especially in a matchup like this. I know, if you're fighting a Gracie or something like that, maybe you're more hesitant to go to the ground, but this was his avenue to win the fight. Do I think he won the fight? Not necessarily. I mean, if you are going to wrestle and you're going to come with a strategy, you need to mix in something to a degree to make it more than just holding position. I talked to MVP about this very thing after the fight, and to his credit, he made no excuses. He basically said, this is on me to nullify the guy who's trying to nullify me, which I thought was a great point. But if you do get in those ground positions, we need at least some measure of effective striking, working to more dominant positions, working for submissions. You can't just have the guy pinned up against the fence and do rabbit punches for 3 or 4 minutes of a round. I don't think that does it for me. More referee intervention, these type of things. I think Logan Storley did maybe the best he could within his limited skill set in this particular fight. But I do not think that's obviously the way you want to see title fights unfold. And there needs to be more done to kind of push more effective offense in these scenarios, in my opinion.
Yeah, I like what you said there at the end, Mike. You're right. It's these last 2 weeks, man. The same thing happened with Bader and Congo. And I think it carries over. Nolan, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. As somebody that spent a lot of time with Bellator, like you guys said, Scott Coker, not necessarily one to really walk anywhere but the tightrope, right? Just center line, always tries to smooth things off. He'd rather not give an answer, just talk about random things than to try to be really decisive, especially where it could make one of his fighters feel uncomfortable. But I wonder if something's changing with him. Recently we heard him say some stuff, kind of push back at PFL a little bit, and now he's being a little bit of outspoken about this decision, which are things we weren't used to. So maybe he's turning a leaf and he's going to start speaking his mind a little bit more. In terms of the criticism, I do think it was fair. I think if anybody reads the rules of the unified rules of MMA, the most recent ones, the updated ones, they'll know that damage is a big part of what's supposed to go on in terms of the scoring. It's supposed to take precedent over everything else. So I think that his statement was educated. I think it's unfortunate for Logan Storley that he has the title and people, including his promoter, don't think he should be the champion. But I appreciate the honesty. I'd much rather have a promoter be honest, especially with how they feel, rather than just try to avoid a situation or pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I love the honesty, and he was very measured, and I think he just said, hey, round out your game, fellas, going forward. How about you guys? What did you think of old Big Daddy Cokes?
I'm glad that he spoke up. And look, it wasn't the most exciting fight. We get that. But what did you expect going in? As Mike said, if you're signing these type of guys, these wrestlers, that's what you're going to get. Some of them do evolve their hands a little bit. But in this particular situation, I understand where Logan Storley's coming from, right? I mean, MVP is arguably one of the best strikers, not just in Bellator, but in all of MMA. He doesn't just win fights with his striking. He hurts people. Look what happened to Cyborg, right? So I understand where Logan Storley's coming from in his tactics. I think he could have been a little bit more aggressive, but I did think he won the fight. And going forward, I think what you have to do is you got to look at the person's credit report, right? Like Carlos Esparza and Rose Namajunas, we go back, like they don't stink it up every fight, right? Every fighter has one of these types of situations. It's going to happen here and there. I don't expect this again from Logan Storley. I hope he opens up a little bit more, but at the same time, Logan can't expect the celebrity treatment going forward.
Yes, and newer fans, I do want to clear something up. He meant male Cyborg, Evangelista Cyborg, about 5 years ago. We did not have an incident. Let's get to the next one. Also at Bellator 281, Paul Daley defeated Wendell Giancomo in what was being hailed as Daley's final MMA fight. However, it doesn't seem like it'll be the final time competing if you follow combat sports closely the last, 100 years. He didn't even lay his gloves down, fellas. And in the post-fight press conference, even Coker hinted that Daley might not be done. Do you think he's retired? Give me a fight that you think is possible and could lure him back, and would you get and that you would get excited about. Nolan, we're going to start things off with you. It's on you, dog. 4 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's so funny, right? Because we always talk about how fighters stick around too long, and then you've got a guy like Paul Daley who is just always so exciting, and even in his even being 40 years old, he goes out there and still has dynamite in his hands. He's still able to add one to the highlight reel. So selfishly, I'm going to break my own rule here and say I hope he comes back. I hope we get to see him compete more in MMA. Seems like Bellator is open to it. But I'm going to predict that he stays away from MMA. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's retired. As we know, there's a lot of other combat sports out there. Obviously, boxing is a big one. He told Arfara Hanoun that he was offered a boxing match against Dan Hardy. So clearly, at one point in time, he at least had his feelers out about potential boxing matches. Obviously, Bellator's got their partnership with Showtime too there, though we have yet to see an MMA fighter cross over to a Showtime boxing show. But I digress. I think we'll see him come back. I think it'll be in boxing. If he were to come back in MMA, I'd love to Bellator to run back the Sabaho Masi fight. I think it's one of the most underrated fights the Bellator has put on in recent memory. But overall, I think he's done with MMA, but we'll see him put on some boxing gloves pretty soon.
All right, Goes, you're up next. What do you think, man? More Semtex, or is he going to that beach and sipping on Mai Tais?
Well, that's the thing about Paul, right? He's always been unpredictable his entire career. So when he says something, it's hard to believe him. I lean towards he's not coming back, just like Nolan, in MMA. I think he's right. I think boxing could be where he does land. But, he's been doing this for so long, guys, over different eras, right? Going all the way back to Strikeforce, UFC, Bellator. This is something that I don't know if Paul's going to be able to accept this being out of his life. So I think eventually maybe he does come back. And if he does come back, I think the fight that would make sense is maybe run him back with MVP. We all felt like when we saw him fight Michael Venom Page the first time, it wasn't really what we were expecting, right? Paul came out and did a little bit of wrestling in that fight. It wasn't the best fight. I think maybe you'd want to rectify that a little bit, come back and get that fight. But I will give you an outside one here. And I think BKFC, they're trying to expand. They're trying to go international. They're giving out very big paychecks. Man, if Paul Daley went over there, the last thing to go is your power, right? Can you imagine him with no gloves throwing bombs out there for BKFC? I think that would be pretty interesting. So I wouldn't be shocked if he went that route.
Ooh, that's a good one there, man. I was thinking Josh Koscheck. Let's bring him back too in some BKFC. All right, how about you, Mike Bond? Something tells me you're leaning another way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to believe Paul Daley that he's done. I think what these guys say about BKFC and boxing, in theory, it sounds good. I don't know what Paul Daley's contract situation is with Bellator. I don't even know if he still owes them more fights, if he's able to do something like that. So I guess that's kind of something that we'd have to figure out too, in terms of if he did want to return to combat sports, do they kind of have him held hostage contract-wise to a degree? But either way, I think this was just such a perfect end for him. I mean, Paul Daley's been talking about getting out of the fight game for quite a while now. He did have like that brief retirement when he had that big weight cutting issue a couple of years back. He was able to come back, do some more fights at 175. He couldn't make 170 anymore. So this just seemed like the perfect storm. I mean, he gets his hometown fight in London. He is down early on. He comes back and knocks the guy out. It was just a great moment for Paul Daley. And I mean, as far as opponents, like we could sit here and find 100 Wendell Goikomos or similar dudes that Paul Daley can knock out. I don't think he loses that capability to do that anytime soon. He can knock out plenty of dudes out there, but I don't think he can do it to the best in the welterweight division. So what's he really working towards? If it's just the paychecks and he wants to keep earning a few more, there's lots of matchups that can be made for him, and say boxing if he's able to do it, or Bellator. I'm sure they'd love to have him on these, Europe shows and stuff going forward. But as of right now, I want to believe that Paul Daley had his final moment. If he says he's retired, let's believe him. But as we know, all MMA retirements are temporary.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, he's 39 years old, 64 fights. If this is it, sail off into the sunset, Paul. Thanks for the memories. All right, let's go to topic number 3. Saturday at UFC on ESPN 36, Jan Blachowicz defeated Alexander Rakic via TKO. There was an injury involved. This was shaping up nicely, guys. Both fighters were active and throwing heavy artillery. Afterwards, Rakic stated on social media that the same injury had occurred 3 weeks prior in training. A few months ago, if you recall, Francis Ngannou, he fought through a knee injury, except he won. So is there anything that can be done to prevent fighters from competing in these types of situations? Even though we had similar cases, we did have different outcomes, but in the end, no one seems to really win. Both fighters are going to be out for extended period of time. So that's also 2 stars that the promotion can't feature. Now, I understand fighters don't get paid unless they compete. I get that. Are there any ideas, though, that I might be missing to protect these athletes and promotion? I want to say one last thing, guys. This is what really got me going. Mike Trout, one of the most highly paid athletes in the world, makes $33.25 million per year. He makes $205,000 per game. So baseball plays 162 games. How do we get there? Because if that guy has an owie, he can miss a game. No big deal. He still gets paid $205K for that game. All right, goes. It's a tough one. You start things off. 4 minutes.
Well, yeah, it is, bro. It's a tough one. It really is. Because I think we add to it a little bit, right? When fighters go through the fight and they make it out, and then later they reveal they're injured, we praise their bravery, right? Company man, never turns down a fight. Bushido spirit. We do that when they do that. And then when the injury stops the fight from getting to where we want, some kind of finish, some kind of finality to it, we were robbed, we kind of play both sides at the same time, right? What was he thinking? For the most part, it doesn't happen to this extent, but you wouldn't really be shocked knowing that every fighter goes into every fight pretty banged up. I wouldn't say to this extent, but they do it. So here's the thing. Fighters are going to be fighters no matter what. That's just who they are. And you're right. They get paid and they have to, they can't be fighting 10 times per year. They can't be like Mike Trout out there every night, right? So I think really the people that have to hone them down a little bit are their coaches and their camps. They have to sit there and they have to talk to them and really evaluate what could potentially come out of this, because they could do damage to themselves. Like Rakic was lucky that he was able to just fall back, but a follow-up punch from Blachowicz, something like that, could really put him in a bad spot. Now, he took the chance, and it probably worked out in his favor because, honestly, I feel like Rakic, when he comes back, will probably carry a little bit of momentum. He looked good in that fight up until then, but as far as getting them to stop doing this or more testing, these guys are tough as hell. I've heard it before, doctors are squeezing on broken hands and they're not wincing. So I don't think there's much you can do. I think it comes down to the camps and the coaches.
All right, Mike Bond, you've been in the game for a long time. I'm sure you've seen a lot of these situations. Share your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think Goes kind of nailed it there. There's limited options you have here. I mean, if you look at Alexander Rakic's situation in particular, he was supposed to fight Jan Blachowicz a little over a month ago in Columbus. Jan Blachowicz pulls out of that fight with an injury of his own. Rakic is looking at 14 months plus without competing, so I'm sure he needs that paycheck. He feels a certain amount of pressure. It's a main event. It's a fight that could get him a title shot. He pulls out of this one. Who knows where he's at in his career? Who knows how long he's out? So there is, I think, ultimately, as Goes kind of referred to, a risk reward with every single one of these situations. You talk about Francis Ngannou, man, like look how that guy rolled the dice as far as his contract situation, the power he has now. If he had lost that fight, especially in that manner, who knows how we're talking about his free agency, this Tyson Fury potential crossover fight, all this different stuff. So you have to weigh kind of the analysis, and it's the reality of the situation. These guys go through training camps. I think people are getting better at learning how to train more effectively, but and the UFC does have insurance as far as like actual training camp or in-fight injuries that do happen, but you still need to get there and step out of the octagon to get paid. So that's what it's kind of going to come down to. Guys are going to take the risk to go for that paycheck because they need it so badly in most scenarios.
All right, finish things off, Nolan King.
Yeah, 1000% what Mike said. I know a guy that will remain unnamed that's on the UFC roster right now, and he was telling me one time about fighting with injuries and how much how these guys go in banged up all the time, and they really want the money from it, right? That's what ends up getting them to meet ends and whatnot. And he told me when he was on Contender Series, he went in to the fight with a super severe injury so that he could mark it down on his medical forms as having suffered that injury in there in order to get paid. Because I think the Contender Series guys are on a little bit different of a deal than the UFC when it comes to training injuries. But it just goes to show you that these guys are willing to, go in there and risk put their bodies on the line. So I think for me, the biggest thing would be to increase fighter pay so that if this does happen, they don't have to think, okay, well, if I don't fight on this night with one leg, then I'm not going to be able to provide for my family for the next few months. I think as a professional athlete to have to worry about that is pretty crazy.
I hope they can bridge the gap somehow, man. We need to get closer to what Trout has than what I saw in the movie Gladiator 20 years ago. They're just carting bodies in and out. Can't have that. All right. Topic 4. Post UFC 274, Tony Ferguson was active on social media and also did a great interview with Mike Bohn, minus a couple of online scuffles with DC and McGregor. Honestly, he seemed in good spirits all week in talking about his future. He mentioned the possibility of joining an MMA team and that a few have already reached out to him, so far. Where do you guys think he could wind up, and who have you penciled in as a possible future opponent? All right, Mike, you did the interview. You start things off. 4 minutes.
Yeah, it was great to hear Tony, first of all, in such good spirits. You never know when you get on the phone with him exactly which version or which mood you're going to get out of him, but it seemed like he was as clear-minded and focused and kind of direct as he's been in recent memory, perhaps ever, when I talked to him. So I'm kind of appreciative of that. But yeah, I mean, the underlying tone of that interview was I need to join back up with the team. He feels he kind of let that fall by the wayside once Rain Training Center in California closed. He wasn't able to get that structure he needed, and he did a lot of good stuff while kind of centering things around himself. But he said, and I quote, "I'm ready to be part of a team again." And he knows in order to succeed at the highest level of the sport, he needs appropriate, proper coaching. So I think obviously Tony, with being the guy who he is, maybe via minus a select few gyms, this guy could probably walk into any gym in the country or the world and be welcomed with open arms. I think a lot of coaches would embrace the opportunity to maybe right the ship with Tony Ferguson, or at least attempt to. So going off what he said, though, I think he probably wants to keep it on his half of the country, so like West Coast. So I liked what he said about working with John Hackelman at the Pit. He knows those guys pretty well. He's been in that environment before. But I also like Syndicate MMA. I saw John Wood in one of the comments of the post we did from that interview saying, "Tony, you're welcome here anytime." So I do think maybe there's some things in motion as far as that. And I just think if we're being realistic here, that's kind of what would make sense. Yeah, we'd love to see him at an ATT or an AKA or something like that, but I just don't think that's realistic in this particular scenario. And as far as who he fights, I mean, I think there's a lot of options out there. I do think the Conor one makes the most sense in my opinion, but I don't know if they're going to be willing to put that fight together. So we'll see, but there's a lot of things we could have got from Tony coming off that knockout loss to Michael Chandler. And I think what we are getting right now is probably the best possible outcome. So that's a positive sign.
Yeah. And again, Mike, that was an awesome interview. I really, really enjoyed it. Folks, check it out. And like Mike said, West Coast is the best coast. Nolan King, you're on that other coast. Tell me, you have any ideas?
Well, I disagree with you on that last thing, but we'll save that for a different episode of Spinning Back Clique. No, I mean, for me, if I just were to, Mike pretty much touched on it all. I was happy to hear that he was happy, that Tony seemed happy, good spirits, obviously a tough knockout to take. But I liked the mention of Brandon Gibson. I think that obviously Brandon has experience dealing with different personalities and unique individuals. And not only that, but kind of crafting a camp around the fighter versus, just running a gym with a lot of different fighters in it that you have to manage. Like, it seems like they really focus on their certain guys. And then sure, they have some other guys, pros on the come up, but they really kind of do that boxing style at this point in time with the roster they have. So I like that. As for an opponent, somebody that's a vet, I'm sick of seeing guys that I like from, that need to step back, get going and keep getting beaten by top competition. So what about a Michael Johnson who won this past weekend, or a Bobby Green, somebody in that category?
Ooh, those are some good ones. Running it back with MJ. All right. How about you guys? Share your thoughts, man. Line me up with a gym or a coach or something.
Yeah, I don't even know that it's so much a team that he needs, because a guy like Tony Ferguson, wherever he goes, he has such a high status that when you go into a new team, you kind of have to earn your way there. You have to earn your stripes. And I don't know if he's going to like that environment. So really, I want to focus more on a coach, somebody that's going to bring the best out of him. And I think Firas Zahabi is a great guy for that, because tactically, he's going to get you where you want to be. Mentally, he's also going to get you where you need to be. He's a 24-hour coach. Having the opportunity to bounce things off of a guy like GSP, who's also down there, I think would help Tony. But really, I think it's that one-on-one time that he needs. As far as an opponent goes, I like Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's another guy that's kind of, he said the experiment's over at 145. He's out there searching for answers. He's kind of in the same situation as Tony. It's a fan-friendly fight. I think it'd be a good fight. So I like Dan Hooker as his opponent.
Love it, man. Great stuff, guys. Tony, man, yeah, that's seriously great interview, and I was blown away. I really, really enjoyed it. We got to get to the fifth topic, though. Dustin Poirier, he wants a fight. Damn it! He recently accepted a fight versus Colby Covington. Nothing really official from the UFC, I might add. Then Stephen Thompson even proposed a fight versus Poirier. Poirier didn't exactly shoot that one down. Listen, this is the weird thing, guys. This guy was one half of two of the highest grossing pay-per-views in 2021. Why is it so hard to book him again? Him and Nate Diaz are extremely annoyed at their bridesmaid treatment, and it's difficult to really blame them. What do you think about all this madness? Man wants to fight on July 30th. He said that, at least. Nolan, you're going to kick things off. You got 4 minutes.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird gift and a curse for Dustin Poirier. He's one of the best in the world. He's one of the biggest names in that division, yet it seems like that he almost has so many options that he doesn't necessarily get, shoehorned into one of them. Sometimes we see guys that have the name recognition. They don't have the skills anymore. So you say, okay, book him in a fun fight. Other times you see a contender that maybe doesn't have the biggest name recognition, and you say, okay, well, he's not a huge name, so he'll really have to work and do something to get back to a title fight. But for Dustin Poirier, he's got both. He's a big name. He's somebody that fans like. You can throw him as a headliner on a pay-per-view against another big fighter. And then also he's still proven that he essentially perennially is the number 2 guy in the world. I mean, he really only loses to guys that hold the title. Sure, those guys rotate and they change, but Dustin Poirier stays at the same spot, which makes things very difficult. I would say overall, I think the UFC and him should have an easier time about negotiating these fights. It seems like for whatever reason, and maybe it's because of the other people, maybe it's because of the Connors and the Nate Diaz's, that these things with Dustin seem to get so delayed when he's online saying, I'm ready to train, I'll fight, Colby Covington at welterweight, I'll go fight Nate Diaz at lightweight. So I just hope the UFC can offer him something that is within the realm of possibility, because it really doesn't seem to me like it should be this difficult.
Yeah, and I'm getting to the point, I don't care who he fights. July 30th just sounds good. All the names he's tied down to sound good. All right, next up is Goes. What are your thoughts here?
I'm with you, George. I mean, if you're an MMA fan, you definitely want to see Dustin Poirier. He always gives you an honest fight. It's always a good fight, great camp. He's a guy you want to see, but I think it really comes down to money. And right now, if you look at a guy like Stephen Thompson, who's an amazing fighter, I don't know that he gives you that, right? So for me, the perfect dance partner is a Nate Diaz. But with Nate Diaz, there's a lot of baggage that comes along with that right now. It seems like Nate Diaz is a little bit in the UFC's doghouse, and I don't know if you want any of that to kind of bleed over on you. So really, I think the option that we're going to be left with might actually be Colby Covington at 170, because Colby Covington's a guy that asked for it. Dustin Poirier says he wants a fight. There's a little bit of heat there, right? Dustin gets to play that good guy role that he's really good at playing, because he is a good guy. And I would even say the guys at 155, let them mess each other up for a little bit, take a little break, go up to 170. Even if you get a loss at 170, you can always say, hey, that's 170. I tested myself up against a bigger guy. I think Colby Covington is where he might end up, but perfect scenario would be if you could work something out with Nate Diaz.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I don't really want to see the Covington matchup. All right, Mike, you're going to close things up for this week. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, man, just sense the frustration coming off Dustin Poirier. Like off that fight with Charles Oliveira in December, he was so emotional after the fact. We didn't even know if he was going to retire, if he wanted to fight again. And it seems like in these past couple months, he's really found that passion and he wants to get in there so badly. And there seems to be no movement on the UFC side. He's not getting fight offers. All the call-outs are kind of just falling by the wayside. So it's really difficult. And I know he's getting pretty upset with the situation. The Nate Diaz fight, to me, makes the most sense. I think that's the one they should do. It's right there sitting in their lap. Both guys want it. You can do it at 170. It's a in my opinion, a non-title pay-per-view headliner that they could do similar to a Covington versus a Masvidal. It's right there. It's a layup. So I don't really understand. I know Nate's got his contract situation, but it's just, I don't know. It seems that's the one to do. Outside of that, I think now if we're moving beyond Nate, it's just to the point where you can see how badly Dustin wants to fight, because he's calling out Colby Covington, who he said he would literally never fight and that he would never give the clout to. So that kind of shows it all right there. But out there, I mean, man, just throw a name at the wall. He had Gilbert Burns calling him out. He's got Wonder Boy. He's got options at 170. The Michael Chandler thing, I think, is pretty tasty, with those two kind of tweeting back and forth and ignoring each other to a degree. So I think the options are limitless when you come into Dustin Poirier. Just book this man fight. I understand. Just make it happen. He's such a big name. Do it.
Killed it, loved it. All those are great possibilities. I think it's funny how, when Chandler came in, Poirier said nope, he hadn't earned his stripes in the UFC, and now as of late, you have to remind Chandler who Poirier is. I don't know, but something please get done on July 30th. Folks, great talking to you guys again here on the Spinning Back Clique with this outstanding staff that we have. Leave a comment below, make it some good ones. We always answer, and folks, we'll see you next week here again on the Spinning Back Clique.